Appreciate you joining me today. It's October 29th. Our reading today comes from the Gospel of John. John 13, Jesus washing the disciples' feet. This is after Passover, Lord's Supper. Parallel accounts talk about how within this same time frame, the disciples had been arguing about greatness. Here's the Lord's answer. Verse 1, Before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come, that he should depart from this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. And supper being ended, the devil having already put it into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going to God, rose from supper and laid aside his garments, took a towel, and girded himself, and he's going to wash the disciples' feet. One for us to just think about. And obviously, yes, Judas, son of perdition. We know what Jesus says. It would have been better for him never to have been born. I think he's one of the few people who we can definitively say is lost because of those comments. But at the same time, Jesus says all of them would stumble. And so we may think about Judas and his selfishness, and he was selfish, betraying the Lord for just 30 pieces of silver. He's a thief. Used to take the money from the treasury box. And he's selfish. And undoubtedly that is true. But at the same time, the disciples are arguing about who's the greatest in the kingdom. Is that not also selfish? To a certain extent, is that any less selfish? You might think about that question. Again, they're not going to betray Jesus, but one of them sure is going to deny Jesus, thinking about Peter. And so it's just an interesting situation, especially in light of everything that's happening in this circumstance, in this situation. And what I mean by that, here they are arguing about greatness. The devil having put it into Judas's heart, right? As it speaks about having already put it in the heart of Judas Iscariot to betray him. Judas doing what he's going to do. But there they are, and they're all stumbling. And it's at the very least, even if Jesus was not going to the cross at this point, even if they were not going to sing a hymn and go out to the Mount of Olives, even if there wasn't the Garden of Gethsemane coming nigh, at the very least they should have been thinking about the Passover. At the very least they should have been thinking about the Lamb giving its life. At the very least they should have been thinking about the blood on the doorposts. At the very least they should have been thinking about the fact that there they were in Israel and they weren't in Egypt because Israel had been delivered from bondage. The New King James, the way New King James puts it in Exodus, is this is a solemn night of observance. At the very least, they should have been thinking about that instead of thinking about themselves. At the very least. But of course, it's not the very least. The Lord has instituted the Lord's Supper now. This is my body, which is given for you. This is the blood of the new covenant. New covenant? Not sure if they understood that in the moment. But that quotation, the Hebrews passage, I am making a covenant with Israel, not like the old covenant, that's a quotation from the Old Testament. And so when Jesus says, this is the blood of the new covenant, and it's for the remission of sins. Whose sins? And here they are arguing about greatness. And Judas is, there's so much selfishness in that room. And that now you have the supreme example of selflessness. And he gets up and he starts wiping their feet. And he gets to Peter, and we know what Peter says. Lord, are you washing my feet? And Jesus answered, what I'm doing you don't understand now, but you will know after this. Verse 7, Peter said to him, you shall never wash my feet. Jesus answered, if I do not wash you, you have no part with me. And Peter, to his credit, says, Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head. Towards the end of the chapter, Jesus is going to predict Peter's denial. Peter needed cleansed, and he's going to need cleansing. But instead, here, before the Lord starts washing their feet, someone's thinking about money, and others are thinking about themselves. It's a difficult passage when you really start thinking about it. And of course, we have to apply it to ourselves because we would be doing the same thing. And we do the same thing. And we can be selfish. And we can be greedy. And we need to remember the Lord's sacrifice. And we need to examine ourselves and make sure we're taking the Lord's Supper in a worthy manner. We look at ourselves and we look at our behavior in the midst of the body. And we recognize our dependence on the Lord. Our eyes on the author and finisher of the faith, looking unto Jesus. Appreciate you. Hope you have a good day. Hope you join us tomorrow for another brief look into God's Word.